Hi, you guys. My name is Tu, and I am the Nursing Director of Advanced Hair Restoration. Today, we are looking at, this is the quote, worst hair transplant results ever, exclamation point. And I think this video is done by Hairliciously. That made my tongue feel weird. Hairliciously. Okay, let's see what's going on with this guy.
Let's take a look at this first photo here. This is what I would call a pretty bad hair transplant. And any person looking at his hairline can tell that he's actually had a hair transplant. Just look at how spaced out his hairline is in the front and the lack of density. And it also looks like multi-unit grafts were used to the frontal portion of the hairline, and which creates that gap-like and pluggy appearance.
Yeah, so a multi-unit hairline that he's referring to is when the hairline is placed with multiple follicular units, right? So a graft can have one follicle or 2, 3, 4, depending on your natural grouping that God gave you. And when you do a hair transplant, it is actually ideal to put singular follicular units in your hairline because that's how your natural hairline actually is. So you go from single and then you do the multiples behind that. In this particular case, the picture that he shows, yes, it is very obvious that this guy had a hair transplant, right? So a lot of people, when they go into aesthetics, even for like a boob job, some people want the look of a boob job and some people want a natural looking boob job. In this particular case, like most men would want a natural looking hairline. A lot of men do not want to disclose that they got a hair transplant, which is understandable. So if you want a natural looking hairline, it is recommended that you do singles in the front, probably 200 or so, depending on the doctor's preference on that. But in this particular case, this guy's hairline is obvious. His hair did grow, so the hair transplant technically worked, right? But there are gaps, which this guy's mentioning. And when you do have multiple follicular units, it actually creates the pluggy look, which is kind of like doll hair, which is like a random thing and poof, kind of comes out. It looks abnormal to the human eye because it's not normal.
And the hairline also looks too straight, while a natural looking hairline should, kind of look staggered and not uniform. So I'm actually an advocate to using nape hair for the hairline because the nape hairs are a lot thinner and it kind of recreates that illusion of baby hairs. A lot the finer hairs, because if you use the hairs in the back of the scalp, it's pretty thick, and that's why when doctors just use the hairs that's extracted from the back of the scalp and implanted, it's going to look very unnatural because it looks so thick and it's just going to make it look very unnatural. So the next photo here shows an FUE procedure that happened in the hands of a doctor with inadequate training, and you can see how the donor side has been over harvested, and the doctor actually went well beyond the safe donor harvesting area with a pretty large punch extractor. Now, this kind of defeats the purpose of a hair transplant since...
Okay, so that picture is... that actually hurts my heart a little bit. I almost want to meet the guy and be like, hey, are you okay? And like hug him. So the donor area, it does take a skilled extractor or harvester to be able to extract a safe number of grafts. Now, what is considered safe? From what I understand, can be relatively anecdotal. We've had some doctors do really conservative where they're like, I'm only comfortable doing 2,000 grafts FUEs. I've had people do 2,500, 3,000, 3,500. It really depends on the doctor, the practice, what the goals are for the patients, as well as the capability of the extractor, him or herself. Let's see what else he has to say.
Of a hair transplant, since we are trying to use hair grafts that tend to be resistant to DHT. And the most optimal area for a donor hair harvest is depicted in the photo shown here. And even if this person were to grow out his hair in the back, it's going to look very thin because so many grafts have been extracted from the back of the scalp. And this person won't likely be a good candidate for another hair transplant because he's pretty much overused his donor zone. The next photo here shows what is...
That one is kind of a guess. So yes, his donor area after this extraction was a little bit, I would say, it was extreme. It was a lot more than I would, normally see. But it really depends on his healing. So if all those hairs, like most of them came back because the extractor couldn't get the follicles and had a high transsexual or whatever and the hairs grow back, he still actually might qualify for a hair transplant, which is a more skilled extractor. So I don't really know until the healing kicks in. And usually it's recommended to do a second procedure or potential second procedure probably by the 6-month mark. Your skin has healed, your body and your hair has kind of grown back. You get to see what you have and what you don't have. We will just see. It really depends on the hair they took out. I really wonder if that one grew. That's the key thing. Yes, when you do a hair transplant, we will take hair from here and put it where you need it. When you take hair from the back, it's like withdrawing from the bank. You are taking it out. So yes, it will be thinner. That is okay. If you're not okay with that, then you do not qualify for a hair transplant. Just be informed of what you're actually doing, because I've had patients who literally tell me, I don't care about my hair back here, I just want hair up here. It depends on what your desire is, your expectations, and hopefully the doctor is able to reach a level of understanding and agreement with you during the consultation and then the day of your procedure as well. That's really key. So, it just depends on what you're comfortable with. Some people it don't matter. Some people it matters a lot. So that depends.
Known as cobblestoning, or aka bumpy scalp. And this typically happens when the doctor removes too much tissue from the donor zone, and when the grafts are placed in the recipient area, the excess tissue heals incorrectly, resulting in a bumpy appearance. Another reason for getting cobblestoning is when the grafts are not planted deep into the recipient area, and since the grafts are going to be placed too high, the surrounding tissue raises as the incision heals, and this is what can actually cause the bumpy and elevated appearance. You can actually avoid making the same mistake by working with an experienced doctor that knows exactly how deep to insert the hair grafts into.
Yes, so this is actually a good point too. Again, as he pointed out, you need to find a great doctor and a great team. You need a team with experience to be able to, the doctor makes the incisions, right? He needs to assess the depth of how deep he's going into your scalp, depending on how long your graft actually is. Can't be determined till the day of surgery. On top of that, you need a skilled group of people to be able to implant those hairs in the depth and the angle that the doctor created. So that relationship is actually really key.
To the scalp. Now this next picture here shows another hair transplant disaster. This particularly looks like my hairline because you can see how there are multi-unit grafts implanted into the hairline. So let me just show you guys my hairline up close. Notice how there's a lot of multi-hair grafts into the frontal portion, and the density isn't just quite there, although I am right by bright light. But there's a lot of multi-hair grafts that just make it look very pluggy. So the hairs in the front are thick in diameter when they should have actually used softer single hairs. And that's one of the problems with a lot of these hair transplant doctors, where they only utilize the hairs from the back of the scalp, where the hairs are a lot thicker, like I mentioned earlier. And it's difficult to create a natural looking hair if you don't use soft nape-like hairs for the frontal hairline. Now this next photo here is another hair transplant disaster. And the thing is, most people that don't know anything about hair transplants might look at this guy and say that he has a natural full set of hair. But the reality is that this guy's hairline is nothing close to natural. Just note how symmetrical his hairline is on both sides. And a natural hairline should be staggered and not linear like this person's hairline. Also, the doctor who worked on this patient also used multi-unit grafts in the hairline, making it look very pluggy and unnatural. This next photo...
Okay, this guy calling every guy a disaster is a little harsh. I would just always ask, are these patients happy or not? If I said, I've had some patients that really request unique circumstances because that's what they want, and if the doctors don't want to put their name on it, they won't have those patients. But I've definitely heard those requests before. So I have no idea if this guy went to this other doctor. He's like, I know this is unnatural, but I really want a square cut hairline or whatever, and this is what I want, this is what I'm paying for, and the doctor proceeded and the patient's happy. I don't know. The one thing that's unique is that, or the good thing is, the hair did grow, right? So in that part is technically a success. When it comes to beauty and aesthetics, that is subjective. So I would say saying it a disaster is not, to me, fair in some of these cases. But if your goal is natural, that is not natural. That's all.
Here, notice how this hairline design mimics a bell-shaped hairline, and a lot of the hair transplant doctors actually try to mimic this hairline shape because it kind of shows the natural recedingness where the temples kind of go back. But in my opinion, I just see way too many hair transplant results on YouTube and from online that mimic this very same symmetrical hairline design, and it's followed by these small indentations on the hairlines where there's it looks like tiny balls that are just dangling on the hairline. I don't think this is the best way to go about designing a hairline or a staggered hairline. It just looks weird, and from seeing many results of people who actually had this type of hairline initially right after the hair transplant, it never looked natural. This is another one where the hairline was created using multi-grafts, and it just looks very unnatural and pluggy, and as I mentioned earlier, A natural looking hairline has to look soft with single hair grafts that are then supported with multi-hair grafts.
Yeah, that one was definitely very, very pluggy. I'm assuming that this guy had also had a great donor area, and they just should have made singles. They should have actually found the singles, like he mentioned, and placed it in the hairline. His density was there, though, because each graft looked like it was really thick.
To add in the density in the back, but this one really does not look that good. This next one here, I can particularly spot this person's hair transplant from a mile away because number one, the hairline is too uniform and straight, creating a pluggy appearance due to...
Man, this guy is so brutal. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. I can spot this guy a mile away. Holy moly. Okay. All right. Who hurt you today, Mr. Hairliciously? My goodness.
Multi-unit grafts used in the hairline. And number two, the fact that this guy was receding on the triangular temples, but the doctor did not rebuild it. Many doctors have a lot of difficulty rebuilding the triangular temples because they have to consist with the right type of hairs and the right type of angles, because normally the hairs on the sides, on the temples, are very thin. And that's a problem with a lot of doctors because they're scared because they know that they can't recreate the temporal points. And they just tell the patient that they can't do it, or they just don't do it at all. One of the reasons why I got mine done was because I knew that if I didn't get this done, it's still going to look like I was receding, and it's going to make my forehead look a lot bigger. But the fact that I actually brought this in a little bit closer to my forehead makes the distance from one temporal point to the other temporal point a lot smaller, making the overall forehead look a lot smaller. But I still have issues with my temporal points, because the hairs here, like I said, it's very hard to recreate to make it look natural. And if you guys look here, look how thick this hair is. This hair was actually from the back of the scalp when the doctor should have used a lot more softer hairs. So if I were the doctor, I probably would have tried to use some of the hairs on the sides here and implant them here, or use some type of nape hair from the back of the neck and then use it here, because the hairs here, like I said, should be very thin. They should be single hair grafts, but then it still looks way too thick here, which does not make it look natural. So this last photo that I'm going to be talking about is...
Yes, temples, he's not wrong. It is a different skill set as well. Some doctors, they don't like it. You find a skilled doctor there, they should be able to do it and get it at the right angle. The other issue is sometimes doctors, because the hairs right here are actually laying flatter. So as you make the incision, you have to go at the right angle to create, so when it grows out, it's flat naturally. His doesn't look terrible. I don't think so, but I understand if he's very nitpicky, it doesn't feel like your own natural hair because it is thicker. They did use the hair in the back. Should they have used the hair on the sides and stuff? Yes, they probably should have. But hairs on the sides here as an extractor is a skill set. These hairs here, because they're smaller, because they're more fragile, because at a flatter angle, requires a more delicate hand to be able to retrieve them. Again, finding a doctor that's really skilled in those areas and having proof of results, you can make a better assessment for yourself. I've definitely had patients that definitely have temples and they're very happy with it. It just kind of depends on the expectations and the skill set of the team.
Is a female that has had a hair transplant on the hairline. Now, we don't typically see a lot of female hair transplants because a lot of people don't really go for, like lowering their hairlines. But this is more typical for people who actually are African American, where they tend to suffer from genetic hair loss. But this lady here had a hair transplant to lower her hairline, although she wasn't balding or receding or anything like that. But look how natural her before photo is, since it also has her baby hairs in the front. Now, I particularly like females who actually have baby hairs because I think it makes them look a lot more feminine, and it just makes the forehead and the hairline just look a lot more natural. But if a female does not have it, like in her after hair transplant picture, notice how thick her hairline is in the front now versus the one before, where it was a lot more softer, and there was a little bit of lack of density, but that's what makes it natural. But this one here just looks like she has a thick set of hair in the hairline, which does not look natural at all. It looks very pluggy, and I think she looked a whole lot better before than she did after her hair transplant. So a lot of these photos might look like good hair transplants.
This guy, ooh, okay. So going to the female side. Sorry, hit this thing. I'm getting emotional. Women definitely have a different hair loss pattern than men do. Hair transplants are predominantly done on male patients because of their male pattern baldness. females, yes, either they have generalized thinning, which a lot of them don't qualify for hair transplants. For her, it sounds like she wanted to lower her hairline because she wanted to reduce her forehead size. That is a beauty standard. Like, it depends on where you're from. I know I have a giant forehead. Now you're going to be staring at it. But it is something that a lot of girls have considered. So some of them, they actually literally cut the skin and then physically bring it down, risking having a scar. Some doctors do that. Other people, like this woman, looks like she did a hair transplant. They took the follicular units and added. And again, if she's happy with it, yes, it's not as natural, maybe to his standard, Mr. Hairliciously, but for her, ask her if she's happy, if that's what she wanted, that she looks. Sure, you might have been better to use baby hairs and all those things, but if she was able to lower her hairline, reduce the size of her forehead to what she's looking for, then that would be ideal. I'm such a weirdo. Please edit this out.
A lot of these photos might look like good hair transplants in the beginning, and that's exactly what I felt when I had mine done. I thought that my hair transplant result was the best and that the doctor that I chose was the best doctor. But, you know, the more that I learn about hair transplants and the more that I see for like different types of hair transplant results, I've noticed that it's very hard to find a good doctor who can produce natural looking hairlines. And this happens to a lot of people who end up getting, you know, their hair transplants in Turkey, Asia, even in the US, because they're not well equipped with the information and knowledge that they need to know. And they don't really know what it means to have a natural looking hairline. And I was also a victim to an unnatural looking hairline because, you know, as you guys can see, the doctors did use multi-grafts into the hairline. And I didn't know that, you know, when I first went to go get my hair transplant, because I didn't do my full research and I didn't really notice, you know, these little things. Now, a lot of people might be like, hey, you know, you're just too anal and you're just overanalyzing all these small things. But that's not true, because you have to kind of look into these small things, because it's the small things that can stand out and make your results look unnatural. So hopefully this video explains to you guys what it means to have a bad hair transplant, what it means to not have a natural looking hairline, so that you guys can do your proper research and really find a good doctor who can create natural looking results.
Okay, so this guy, I can tell that he really just wants to put his story out there and help people be more informed, because he admitted he wasn't really informed when he did his procedure, and he was, sounds like, disappointed. And that's key. Have realistic expectations, do your research, see what you actually want. Again, even for women, some people want that type of plastic surgery look. Some people want this, want that. It just depends on what you want and if that person can deliver it to you. And yes, the doctor, the experience, and the skill set does matter. Now, please don't go out there and be like, well, this doctor has 30 years experience, that means he's automatically good. No, not necessarily either. Maybe some of his practices are stuck in the old times. He's not as modern as some of the younger doctors out here. It matters about the results. Please look at the results, see if his style is something that you, or her style, is something that you are happy with, and the experience of the team. Nowadays, that actually really matters, and that's where the actual quality kind of comes in, is who is your extractor, or is the physician doing everything from start to finish? If he is, you're basically going to be dealing with a very tired person doing every part of your procedure, as opposed to an assembly approach where there's different teams for different sections of the procedure. That allows quality assurance, but prevents physical fatigue. That's really key from my personal experience. But of course, you can do your research, you know, but the experience of the team in combination with the experience of the doctor, the flow of the office, and what they care about. Are they promoting natural hairlines? Or like, hey, we're just gonna get big numbers and we don't care where the hair comes from? What is their kind of their business model on how they want to do things? How do they take care of their patients? And for you, what do you want? That's all that really matters. You're the one looking in the mirror every single day. And so as long as you're happy and you're comfortable with the choices that you made, hopefully they're informed, then you're good to go. But these people, if they're unhappy, then definitely get a correction, you know, but I would never want to say like, it's a terrible disaster. They got destroyed. Like, some of the stuff, this guy was actually really harsh. But, you know, could areas be improved, you know, depending on the aesthetics? Sure. I'm not against that. And some of the pictures I was a little bit like, whoa. But yeah. And I'm Tran again. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. If you kind of like what you hear, please like, subscribe, comment, support, and share. And I will do my best to come back on the next time. Thank you.